what we got is a question I've had about one of my PRs and to see if a conditional can be optimized out by V8. Um, Basically, what they're trying to tell is if we have a test condition um, and some kind of early return or some other kind of branch, that V8 is able to determine that that branch has a constant value and it can throw away all the code that is unreachable. So in this case, I've made a little test file and I've made my little conditional. Right now we're saving it to a variable test. And we're just going to do an early return. If test is true, it's never going to call date.now. But if test is false, it will always call date.now. So yeah. What we can do with Node is use some command line flags in order to determine kind of what the output of an optimized function is. So we'll just go over all the different command line flags really quick. So we're going to use this thing called allow native syntax. This is a very kind of debug only command line flag. It's unstable. It'll always be unstable. But it allows you to get access to a specific special syntax that you can see down here on line 8 that lets us do things like call the garbage collector and stuff that you don't want normal JavaScript code doing. And then we're going to have a bunch of different flags in order to kind of tell V8 to print any code that it finds and optimizes. We want code comments, so V8 can give you some minor comments. It just helps a little bit for readability. It's not necessarily readable still. We do want it to print the code, so even if there are code comments, we actually want to see the code that it prints out. And we want to print in a verbose mode. This is just going to be easier for this specific task. It gives you more information about what V8 is doing. And so what we're going to do is we're going to run this file, and we're going to have the test variable swap. And we're going to compare the outputted code between when test is true and test is false. So Node comes with a built-in utility called debug log. The PR that I'm working on is to actually feature detect if the debug log is enabled or not. Debug log is a way of kind of doing console printing only if environmental variables are set. So in this case, since we're using foo as our debug log section, if you include a environment variable, node debug equals foo, that would enable the debug log. And so when we enable the debug log, that's going to make our test become true, and we'll return instead of calling date.now. Using date.now because a lot of functions, anything that kind of needs to inspect the outside environment, just aren't going to be optimized out. It's a simple thing. We don't want to use eval because eval has a bunch of weird effects on JavaScript code, like you can actually introduce var variables in sloppy mode code. And we can do a few things to kind of see what V8's going to optimize. We can move this file into strict mode, we can swap the environment variable, we can, instead of saving to a variable, do a property access, and we're going to just do all those really quick and kind of see what happens. Whoop. So here I have a command. This is going to run it with the condition set to true. So that would be an early return. We're not going to see a date.now call in it. So if I run it, I can see a few things. I'm particularly interested in the code comments down here. We can see a total size of the code is 508. You can see some source positions that are being used. So yeah, here we have 198. So if we go in our browser, yeah, the if is right around there. So that's where they're getting to the if statement. Yeah. So if we go and we actually change this, so we're only changing the value of that Boolean by taking away foo from our debug condition. So this is only going to change that true condition to false. And if we run again, we can actually see that the code size has changed from 508 to 579, and we can actually go and start to look at what's going on there. So we have some source code positions here. We can actually scroll up a little bit. There's a lot of data coming in, but you can see the comments correspond to these sections, which is kind of nice. So here is around where stuff started to get different. B3 was, I think, 15 in this one. And I think it was 24 in the other one. No, 35 in the other one. And so overall, the quick way to tell kind of if it's going to call date.now, since it's not going to be optimized out, is the sizes. If you want to go read the assembly above where it's actually doing this, you can do so. But for now, we're really just interested in when it's true, it is taking that early return, which is what we wanted to see. And the code size is smaller because of it. And if it actually has to go and call date.now when we set foo to, well, when we remove foo, sorry, you can actually go in the up above assembly and kind of see, if you can read assembly, that it's performing a call. Other things that we can do, we can kind of make sure that this works with property access, not just with a raw Boolean variable. So property access, since in general things in JavaScript are mutable, they're a little bit more complicated. They get a lot more complicated with getters and setters. So for this PR, this feature, when it was originally created, it lazily parses that process environment variable. And so we're actually using a getter for this dot enabled. And we just want to see if, a more ergonomic stance of just having debug dot enabled rather than saving it to a variable, if that is still able to be optimized. So that's what we're doing. We're stopping the variable that we were converting the value straight to a Boolean, and then seeing if even with property access that V8 is able to optimize it. So same sort of deal. When it is not set, it's false, and it's going to have to call date.now. That's going to require a little bit more code than just returning. So interestingly, this is actually a smaller code size. So smaller code size actually can mean a few different things. It may mean that it's actually performing a call out to another function. So even if the code size is small, it may be a little bit deceptive in that aspect, because there are function calls within the code that's generated. So that was it when the condition was false. This is when it had to call date.now. When the condition is true, it does not have to call date.now. Boop. So when it is true, we actually see the same code size, which means that when we were changing our code to be the property access rather than the intermediate variable, we actually lost that optimization. And so that's unfortunate. But we can continue working on this PR and try to figure out how to do it better. There are tons of things that you can do if you can kind of inspect the code. I don't really want to go into it right now. I just thought this was a little bit interesting, and I've seen people ask questions on my PR about if the optimization could occur, so I figured it would be a good time to record kind of how I'm debugging that. So, yep, that's all. I'm going to stop streaming.